He had heard of fish being found in underground caverns, or even the fossils of things that had once been there. But here Odin found no sign of life. Nothing except traces of the vast underground river that must have once swept through here long ago. It was a desolate feeling to stand there with his beam of light pushing the dark away, alone in a place which apparently had never known the beat of life before. And then Odin saw it. A footprint. A small footprint which must have been made by someone who wore moccasins or sandals. He recognized it at once. He had seen hundreds of those footprints. A Niebling had been there. How long before he did not know, but certainly Odin's theory had been right. The cavern led the way to Opal. Jack Odin was not sure how many times he ate and slept as he toiled his way downward. The long dead river had carved cunningly and beautifully upon the walls of the tunnel, and the dripping waters of centuries had fashioned pedestals, carvings, and statues that were beautiful indeed. Ordinarily, he would have been interested in these, for Jack Odin was a man who loved beautiful things. But now he had but one idea: to go on. Occasionally he found more footprints, but always near the scattered pools. The dwarves must have kept against the walls and come out upon the sand only to quench their thirst. He wondered about that, and a possible answer came to him. They had been there without a light, feeling their way, almost, although he knew that they could see in the dark to a certain extent. He wondered at their courage. Here, with two lights, the staring darkness and the silent empty spaces were making him shaky. The descent became sharper. At times he slid down long grades of limestone. Now and then he came to sharp drops where little waterfalls had once been. But there was usually sand below and he was able to leap down without much harm, other than a jolt or two. But once he came to one of those drops that must have measured 100 feet. He found a few rocky steps where the little precipice met the wall and clambered down, but it was rough going, and he had to make a jump for it at the last. Picking himself up and dusting the sand from his clothes, he thought he saw a white gleam over against the wall. His light found a squat skeleton sitting there grimacing at him. He touched the skull and it fell to powder. Here was one of the dwarves, a Niebling, but the bones did not belong to this age. The poor fellow must have lain there for centuries. Dr. Jack Odin was never able to get all of his medical training out of his mind. Examining the skeleton, he found that both legs had been broken. Apparently, the little man had been climbing up or down the precipice Odin had just negotiated and had slipped and fallen. His leg shattered, and infection setting in, the Niebling had crawled against the wall to die. Odin could have imagined him doing the last task silently. They were akin to the animals that they loved, the Nieblings. They did not complain. Hours and hours later, as Odin toiled his way downward, he became aware of a growing stench in the stale air. Even this was welcome, for he was becoming obsessed with the idea that the cavern had not changed since the long ago river had died, and that nothing in it could change. It was an odor of rottenness. Where there was decay, life had also been. By the time he reached the next pool, the putrescence which hung on the stale air was almost sickening. There he made his second discovery. A saurian of some sort, with squat legs and long fanged mouth, had died there. Half decayed, it made a little phosphor glowing in the dark, and its long teeth flashed as he played a beam of light over it. Noisome as it was, the sight of it made his heart quicken, for here was one of the things of Opal. It must have crawled up here from that silent sea. Then a feeling of gloom and dread swept over him. What had happened down there to make this thing leave its home and crawl here to die? Odin went on and on, the smell of the thing behind him slowly fading from the air. Then, as he rounded a corner, Odin blinked his eyes. Far ahead of him was a red glow. Taking a deep breath, he thought he smelled smoke. Or was it sulfur? He had never been able to get one grim possibility out of his mind. What if some of the fires and lava streams of inner earth should lie between him and the world of Opal? He had gone too far to turn back, so Odin went on cautiously. As he neared the red glow, he saw that it was only a campfire dying down to coals. But from the darkness came such a clamoring of hisses, groans, and screeches that he could feel goose pimples popping out on his arms. His rifle held a clamp for his flash. Making gun and light ready, he advanced cautiously, still unable to determine what was happening except that one hell of a fight was going on. Then a coal burst into quick flame and he could see the struggle. A broad-shouldered man, stripped to the waist, was fighting with one of the saurians. He had closed its long mouth with a huge hand and was striking again and again at the white throat with a broad-bladed knife. The thing was screeching and clawing at the man's arm. Its razored tail was lashing forward, and the man was dodging it as he kept backing in a circle and thrusting the head upward and backwards. Both brute and man were streaming blood. The man made no sound other than an occasional savage grunt as his blade struck deep through the horny hide of the thing. The saurian became wilder with each blow. It was a long shot, but Jack Odin made it. Both man and reptile quickened into momentary stone as his light centered its beam upon them. Odin aimed and fired. The heavy bullet shattered the top of the saurian's head. Then Odin was running forward, calling out in the language of Opal. The broad-shouldered man kicked the wriggling carcass of the thing out of the way and threw a few sticks upon the coals. They flamed up. The man sat down calmly, though still gasping for breath, and began to wipe the blade of his knife upon his thigh. He had regained some of his breath when Odin reached him. Rubbing a gashed forearm and smiling as though such a meeting were an everyday occurrence, he called out cheerfully, "Ho, Nose King! I knew you would come. Sooner or later you would be here and we would go hunting together." The man was Gunnar, successor to Jul and chief of the Neeblings. End of chapter 2.